What's up guys, Belamy Prime here, and today we're going to be tackling part 1 of our melee DPS class reviews. We're just going to be going through a couple of our melee DPS classes, the popular ones that people like to play, and we're just going to be rating them based on their power, their mobility, their crowd control, and their utility that they bring when you're playing. So today we're going to be covering two mainstream classes, ones that are popular and people like to play, and then we're going to be covering more of a bonus class that people don't often play, but is still quite strong and very playable and fun to play. So the classes we're going to be covering today are going to be Darkrunner and then Blade Dancer, the two more DPS oriented classes out of the four main popular classes, and then Ragebinder, which is the Malediction class for melee DPS, which is a super fun class to play. Although it's not the greatest, it has its moments and it's a lot of fun to play. So we're going to include it as more kind of a bonus at the end of the video. But we're going to get stuck in and we're going to talk about Darkrunner first. So we're going to be rating each of these classes out of 5 for their power, that being the damage and the kill potential they bring, their mobility, self-explanatory, their crowd control, so the overall amount of crowd control the class has, and their utility. So utility comes in the form of things like CC removals, CC immunities, healing reductions, raid buffs, so things that buff you and your raid, and different little niche things like that. So we're going to talk about Darkrunner first. Now, the first one we'll talk about is Darkrunner's power. Now, we've given Darkrunner a 4 out of 5 for power. Now, Darkrunner is a very volatile class. It is very, very good for killing. And you're going to always have a solid amount of damage. Now, like most melee classes, your damage comes from your Battle Rage skill tree. So all of your passives in your Battle Rage skill tree. So like, you get your Puncture, which is Fizz Defense Penetration, your Attack Speed Training, which gives you melee crit damage in the form of Delirium stacks, as well as Attack Speed, and then things like Weapon Mastery, which give you melee skill damage, and then Deadly Duelist, which gives you melee crit rate. And we always have enough skills in our Battle Rage skill tree to get all these passives, and the rest of our damage comes from our Shadow Play passives, which in most cases you'll at least have Shadow Training for attack speed. The evasion's nice, and in a lot of builds you will end up with Ruthless Assault, which is an attack speed buff for 8 seconds whenever you inflict a critical strike. So this is super nice. Normally we have enough skills in Shadow Play to get this buff rolling. Of course, if we're stealthing, we have 5 points in, so we get the Bloodthirst Intensified buff as well, which when you get your Bloodthirst stashed, you get increased skill damage and all that juice. So this is mostly where our damage comes from in all melee classes. So this is why we're going to give Darkrunner a 4 out of 5. It gives us all the damage we need. Obviously, the rest of our damage comes from our gear and our weapons and things like that, which applies the same regardless of what class you're playing. So we've given it a 4 out of 5. We get lots of power. Obviously, Oromancy, our determining skill tree, doesn't give us any kind of boosts or reductions to our damage. So it's unchanged, which is why we haven't given it a 5 out of 5 for damage here. The next we'll talk about is mobility. Now, this is the main draw to Darkrunner. Obviously, in Battle Rage and Shadow Play, we already have behind enemy lines. We have our gap closer skills like Tiger Strike and Charge. And we have our Backdrop in Shadow Play, which is a nice little gap closer or escape, and we have our Free Runner, which is nice movement speed. So we have these abilities already in every class, so nice mobility there. Darkrunner also adds on Teleport, which if you're using the base one is a 15 meter teleport, or if you're using the lightning one like I do, it's a 10 meter teleport with a 42% chance to reset. So you can have, if you got good RNG, you can teleport 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And this is a super nice mobility skill. On top of that, you can also take Comet Spoon. This varies between people. Some people take it, some people don't. I like to take Comet Spoon because any kind of mobility that I can squeeze out of the class that I'm playing is aces in my book. I really love the mobility. Obviously, Comet Spoon is a bit clunky to use. It's a straight line. You have to run in after you throw it, and you know, so it can bug sometimes if you're running on like up and down a hill or any kind of slope and things like that. So you have to pick and choose when to use it correctly. But nonetheless, it's a massive boost in movement speed for a nice little distance. So it's a good mobility skill, which is why we've given Darkrunner a 5 out of 5 for mobility. Very mobile class, lots of mobility, very powerful for a melee. Now, the next one we'll talk about is CC. Now, unfortunately, the Oromancy class doesn't really bring much CC to the table. We can take Vicious Implosion, which pulls in enemies in a 10 meter radius. Not the greatest CC in the world, but if you pair it with Thwart, which gives a Shaken debuff, which counts as a slow, and Whirlwind Slash, we can combo the three for a pull, AoE debuff for a slow, and then AoE trip comboed from the slow. So the three of those can be a nice little AoE trip pull in on enemy people. So nice little bit of CC, not the greatest. Normally you'll find yourself not running Vicious Implosion in most cases, and you'll just take Thwart to combo off for the trip on Whirlwind Slash for a nice little AoE trip. Very nice. Other than that, the only kind of CC we have, which is very, 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 very unlikely that you'll use, not reliable, but really fun if you do, is the Fear Reflect on Meditate. Now, if you read here, we have Casting Meditate removes all fear effects when cast and grants immunity to fear for the duration. Nice, right? In PvP, if any enemy attempts to cast fear on you while you're casting this skill, so it lasts for 5 seconds, the fear effect will reflect back onto the attacker instead. Now, like I said, there's very few situations you'll want to use this, and more often than not, it'll get you killed if you try and do this to someone who's trying to fear you. But if you land it, it's extremely funny. But so if you're facing someone like a Shadow Blade who's just going to instantly try and jump on you and fear you, you can pre-cast Meditate if you want and fear them back. And if you land this, it's very, very funny and fun to do. But more often than not, you'll just end up casting Meditate, standing there like an idiot and dying if they don't use their fear, right? So not super reliable to do, but it's good to just remove fears, so we'll talk about it later in the utility. So we've given Darkrunner a 3 out of 5 for crowd control, just because we only really get the Thwart, which we consistently run for the AoE trip, and you can sometimes take Implosion, and if you're running Meditate for the fear removal, then you can reflect it, but I wouldn't recommend it. So we've given it a 3 out of 5 for the CC. Now, for utility, we've given Darkrunner a 5 out of 5. And this is why. So we got a lot of utility skills in this kit that are available to us. Now, you obviously won't run all of them at the same time, but it's good to pick and choose different skills to use in different scenarios. So the Meditate we already talked about is very good against Shadow Blades and any kind of Witchcraft user, because obviously they try and fear you to start or during their combo. So being able to reliably remove that fear is super powerful. On top of that, we have Courageous Action, which removes all sleep effects from a target ally if you cast it on a teammate. You can't cast it on yourself to remove the sleep, but if you pre-cast it on yourself, it gives you 1 full minute of sleep immunity, and it only has a 9-second cooldown. So you can easily keep this on yourself permanently during any kind of fight. So any kind of Witchcraft user that's trying to sleep, whether they're using Lassitude to sleep you or Focal Concussion, which gives a sleep now, they can't use that on you, so good counter to that. Also, not many people know this, but Deep Freeze also counts as a sleep. So any mage that is trying to Deep Freeze you to combo will not be able to Deep Freeze you. They'll still be able to apply the freezing effects like the snare and things like that, but obviously you have Bond Breaker for that, so you can break out of that easily as well. But they can't Deep Freeze you. So very powerful against mages as well if you use it correctly. The next utility we have, also very good against mages, is Conversion Shield. Now I believe this can be used while you are skill can be used while the caster is incapacitated. So yeah, you can use this while you're CC'd. So if a mage locks you down in some sort of AIDS-ass combo, when they're about to blow you up with their big skills, you can pop Conversion Shield, which converts 42% of your magic damage to health. Sorry, magic damage you receive to health. So it's essentially a 42% magic damage reduction for 5 seconds, and you can time it to use it when you're vulnerable. Very powerful against mages. I would recommend using it. And even if you're lazy and not confident about popping it in the middle of a fight, you can pre-pop it going into the fight and get a nice little window of very big damage reduction at the start of the fight. And a lot of archers will blow a lot of their big cooldowns in that first 5 seconds, so it's still useful in this scenario as well. Now these are the 3 utility. We'll talk Vicious Implosion, kind of a utility as well. We can use it on healers and other targets that we're trying to pop when there's healers around trying to heal them. It reduces their received healing by 60% for 4 seconds. Very good utility. Good to use to finish off targets and healers. So these are the 4 that we'll mainly see you using. The rest of them have very niche scenarios where you would use them. Health Lift buffs the health of you and all nearby raid members by 4,000 for 20 seconds. You won't see many people running this, but it's nice to use going into a big raid fight. You can't go wrong with 4,000 HP. It's nice. Banishment. This is also applicable in very few scenarios. If you're doing sparring arena or gladiator arenas where they're using witchcraft and they're using the battle pet, banishment you can cast from a long range on the pet and get rid of it easily, because especially in sparring it's extremely annoying to kill and will take a lot of your skills and a lot of time and investment to kill it, in which time you're normally vulnerable to the actual player, or you just have to straight up ignore the pet and let it hit you for a lot of damage, which we don't want. So if you just spec to banishment real quick before the fight, you can just kill the pet and then deal with the player as a 1v1. So give yourself a small advantage over them for that. Protective Wings, it sucks now, kind of. You don't get immunity. Sure, you can use the flame Protective Wings, which reflects magic damage back to attackers. So if you cast it on a friendly mage ball and there's a bunch of mages attacking and shit, it'll reflect a small percentage of the damage back to them, and players can kill themselves, or it's just helping your team. So you can use it like that. Me personally, I'm too squishy to go anywhere fucking near a mage ball, so I don't even worry about messing with Protective Wings in any way. I would just ignore it. Shrug It Off is good. It removes confinement effects, including petrification, telekinesis, deep freeze, frozen solid, bubble trap, and increases your magic damage reduction by 16% for 5 seconds after the use. So, if you're versing a mage that's, using Malediction to petrify you with the snake skill, I can't remember what it's called, or they're using TK belt and you want to pop it off without them being able to TK you for 2 seconds, they're freezing you, or they're using bubble traps, Shrug It Off is a good way to counter that. Easy to spec into it to take it. Bracing Blast from Oromancy, it's the old Fortress skill. Pushes up to 8 enemies away within a 10 meter radius, and grants the caster 10% magic damage reduction per affected enemy to a max of 30% for 20 seconds. So, if you are the type of melee that just jumps in the middle of a mage ball after if you want to have a little bit of a sphere of safety, you can pop this, push a few people away, give yourself some magic damage reduction, and it also silences the people it pushes away for 3 seconds. So I guess this can be technically counted as a CC, but I honestly never ever use this in any scenario because it just doesn't really fit into my playstyle, and I also really never put 6 whole points into Oromancy, since I tend to weigh heavy into Shadowplay and Battle Rage. So know about the skill, but I don't tend to use it. So we've given Darkrunner a 5 out of 5 utility just because of all the CC breaks, CC immunities, healing reduction, and the different counter skills that it has, especially in 1v1 scenarios against some really annoying classes. So a very, very good all-round class. Great damage, great mobility, great utility. Not the greatest CC, but it's more than enough for me and more than enough to kill multiple people. So, you know, a 3 out of 5 does seem bleak for a CC. So if you're into big CC combos and things like that, this might not be the class for you. But if you're into fast, high-paced melee combat where it's all about blinking in, getting a kill and blinking out, or killing your target as fast as possible, this is a great class for you. So I would recommend trying it out. Now, the second class we're going to talk about today is Blade Dancer. Now, Blade Dancer is Battle Rage, Shadow Play, and then Songcraft. So, Blade Dancer is going to be the only class in out of all the classes we'll talk about for DPS that has a power rating of 5 out of 5. And here's why. We have all of the same damage buffs that a Darkrunner or a Shadowblade or an Executioner would get from all their passives in Shadow Play and Battle Rage. But on top of that, we get all of the offensive buffs that we get from Songcraft, and there's a lot of them. So we'll start talking about the basic ones first. The first one we'll talk about is Battle Hymn. Now, Battle Hymn is just an AoE cast. It affects a 30-meter radius around your cursor when you cast it, affecting you and your allies. So this counts as power for you, as well as utility for a raid or a group. After you cast it, it has a pretty significant cast time, but obviously you pre-pop this before any fight, so you have time and it's fine to use. Increases the attack speed and movement speed of your allies for 30 seconds. It gives you 350 attack speed and 30% move speed. That is a very significant amount of attack speed as a melee, and it's a lot of move speed, which is really, really great. As a melee too, feels really good. So this is very great for our power. It gives us a lot of DPS because of the attack speed, and mobility for the move speed, so that's great. The next one we'll talk about is the Zeal passive. You will be taking enough points in Blade Dancer, in Songcraft, to have Zeal. Now, Zeal is whenever you inflict a critical hit or a critical heal, obviously critical hits, we increase our crit rate by 30%. Now, any melee, once you've got a comfortable amount of gear to where you're actually going to be competitive, you will have a melee crit rate of at least 70%. So when Zeal procs, you will be 100% critting. Obviously, this gets negated by resilience a little, but any crit rate you can pump out is good. The more crit rate you have, the more reliable your damage, the more consistent your damage, the better. So, very good passive for your crit, especially in this crit meta that we have where we're stacking crit damage, which leads me into the next power buff that this class gives, which is our Discipline Performance passive. Now, this passive can stack up to 15 times, and each stack gives us increased critical damage and cooldown reduction on all of our Songcraft skills. How we stack this is by playing Perform skills. So while playing a Perform skill, every 4 seconds you'll get a stack, and also while casting Deadly Refrain, the Deadly Refrain itself gives you 1 stack of rhythm, and the Discipline Performance buffs it so that you get an extra 2. So every time you cast Deadly Refrain, you'll be getting 3 stacks. Once you get to 15 stacks of this buff, you get a Sustained Rhythm buff, which increases all your critical damage by 22.5%, which is a very, 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 very large amount of critical damage, which is very, very powerful for your damage. And this lasts for 20 seconds. So once you've stacked it to 15 stacks, you can maintain it by just pressing your Deadly Refrain every 18 to 19 seconds to make sure it's stacked, so you can pop it sooner or later, you know. As long as you keep that up every 20 seconds, you're going to have a consistent increase in critical damage by 22.5%, which is huge. And if you keep this up, which is very, very, very easy once you hit 15 stacks, it's very, very powerful, especially in group PvP where this is extremely easy to keep up and to have at the start of the fight. So, huge amount of damage, a lot of power. The next power we get, yes, there's more, we get Bloody Chanting. Now, this is a Perform skill, and once you cast it, the initial buff only lasts for 4 seconds, so it has a very small window, and it is sometimes easy to forget about it and easy to not use. But if you learn to weave your songs into your playstyle, you will be a very, very scary and a very powerful melee. So The way to use this skill is there's two ways. One, have it. It's a perform skill, right? So you have to have it constant. It's like a channel skill, essentially, right? But instead of constantly having the buff while you're channeling, the buff rotates. So it goes from 4 seconds times down to 0. Once it hits 0, it goes back to 4 seconds, and you keep going. It actually might be a 5 second, but the buff says 4 seconds. But we'll just say 4 seconds. So you get the buff for 4 seconds. So say I'm going into a big combo. I hammer toss someone, and I shadow smite them for a trip. I can quickly cast Bloody Chanty to get a 4-second buff of increased melee skill damage and attack speed, and then I can go into my Sunder and Precision for huge damage, buffing it with my Bloody Chanty, which will, most cases, unless you're attacking someone extremely tanky, will kill them. And buffing that is just insanely strong. And obviously you can just have this playing as you're running into a fight, so you jump in, you have the first couple seconds of your damage is going to be extremely buffed, and the first couple seconds of your rotation is going to be sped up by the amount of attack speed it gives you. Now this feeds into our Startling Strain, which is an ancestral version we take, which is the life version. So if you go to ancestral skills here, this is once you ascend to your ancestral levels after you hit level 55. You can go into here into your, where is it? Songcraft, I can't see it here. And you have variants of different skills. So the variants of Startling Strain that we take magically improves the beneficial effects target receives from perform skills by 30% for 28 seconds. So if we pop this on ourselves before a fight, you can pop it on allies as well, but if we pop this on ourselves before a fight, we get 28 seconds where our Bloody Chanty and our other perform skills, whether they're coming from us or a group member, will be increased on us by 30%. So the attack speed and the increased melee skill damage that Bloody Chanty gives us is going to be multiplied by 30%. So this just makes Bloody Chanty and things like Quick Step and that even more powerful. So very, very strong. The last and final power buff that we get is a combo between Critical Discord. Now Critical Discord on its own, when you throw it on an enemy, will reduce their physical and magical defense by 15%. Already good, right? But it applies a debuff on them called Discord. Now, while Discord is active on them for 5 seconds, you can then cast Dissonance, which combos to disable their left-hand weapon for 3 seconds. Now this includes shields. So any cloth user or leather user or any user that has a physical defense shield will be disabled as if it doesn't exist for 3 seconds. Now this does two things. One, it reduces their phys defense by however much is on the shield. In most cases, it's probably going to be like 4,500, 5,000 at least defense that you're negating for 3 seconds. So you have a 3-second window where they have a ton of less phys defense. On top of that, most players put max HP gems in their shield. So they can have up to 3,500 HP boosted on their shield, which also gets disabled when you disable their weapon. So you're essentially dealing 3,500 damage to anyone that has these gems, which is 95% of people who use a shield. So you're reducing their max HP, which is making them easier and more burstable, and you're reducing their defense by first a 15%, which applies after technically their shield, and then reducing their shield. So if you drop their shield and they go down to 4,000 phys defense, you're reducing it by 15%, which is like 600. So you're reducing it by another 600 phys defense. And then if you puncture them, they're going to go down another 3,000. So you'll be hitting them for almost 0 phys defense in some cases, depending on who you're hitting, of course. But obviously, this is a ton of physical defense penetration. And obviously, if you have a little bit of phys defense pen yourself, in my case, I have nearly 1,700, which is not hard to achieve. I have like very basic phys defense penetration stuff. You know, using this combo, dropping someone's shield, reducing it by 15%, the 3,000 from puncture, another 1,500 to 2,000 maybe is all you have from your build itself. You're going to be hitting them for basically no phys defense. So healers and things like that in cloth are very, very easy to kill when you use this combo on them. So 5 out of 5 for power for Blade Dancer. Insane sources of damage from every fucking left and right. So very, very powerful, very strong. The most damage you'll get out of any melee class in the game. Now, the next one we'll talk about is mobility. Blade Dancer, we give a mobility score of 4 out of 5. We have 2 mobility skills. We have 1, double time. Now, this has an ancestral version as well. The base one gives you 2 seconds of 200% increased move speed. So for 2 seconds, you can run really fast, and you can use this as a gap closer or an escape. Super nice. We also have the flame version, which is the other good variant of this skill that we can take, which is the same, but instead of 200% increase, it's 130%. But with the additional modifier that if you take damage or you receive an attack during the 2 seconds, it resets the duration. So if I'm running at an archer with double time, the flame double time active, and they're hitting me over and over again, it will keep resetting over and over and over again, and just keep resetting the 2 seconds. So I can just run at them really fucking fast, endlessly. Well, it doesn't say when it ends, but I believe you'll be running really fast for like at least 10 seconds. So it resets a lot of times. More than enough to kill an archer or to get away. Like, if you're running away from an archer in open world and you pop this, then you'll get a long distance and they will not be able to catch you because you can just keep on running until you're way well and truly out of their range. Because, they'll attack you until you're 30 meters away, and then if they hit you that one last time at 30 meters, you still have another full 2 seconds of running at fucking the speed of light. So, very good escape, especially from archers, and a very good gap closer, especially for archers. So, very good mobility. And then, of course, we have Quick Step, which is another song perform skill. It increases our move speed by 20 to 28%, which is further increased if we have the lifestyle link strain on ourselves by 30%. So, good movement skill. And this also applies to our mounts. So, if you're playing your perform skill while you're riding your mount, increases their movement speed as well. So, buffs our mobility score a little bit. So, Blade Dancer, mobility, we're giving a 4 out of 5. Okay, so the next section we'll talk about is our crowd control. Now, Blade Dancer unfortunately doesn't give us very much crowd control, which is a very fair drawback considering the amount of damage it gives us. But we get Sonic Wave. Now, Sonic Wave is a 15-meter range corridor that shoots out in front of you that disables the target for 3 seconds, stopping them from being able to target anyone. So they are unable to tab target to you or anyone else for that matter, whether it's allies or enemies, for 3 seconds. Now this can be used in 2 ways. 1, use it on a target so they can't target you for 3 seconds. They're vulnerable, they can't attack, you can. 2, you can use it on a healer so that they can't target themselves or their allies for 3 seconds. So if you're about to finish off a healer and your CC combo has finished but they're not dead yet, pop Sonic Wave on them. They can't target themselves for 3 seconds. Now obviously they can use AoE heals to heal themselves, but they're unable to use their big self heals like Fervent Healing or Antithesis. Or, what's the other one? Resurgence. So they can't use any of the, or Renewal. They can't use any of the 4 like really, really big heals that are good for like self-healing, right? They could use Mend, but obviously if they don't have enough allies nearby, then it won't heal them. They could use Healing Him, I guess, but if there's no one near them, again, it does next to nothing. What else do they have? They have like a healing circle, but that has a cast time and it's not a super big heal. So again, you're disabling them essentially for 3 seconds where they are going to have a very hard time healing themselves without like potting essentially. So very good against healers to use in that situation. So we're giving Blade Dancer a CC score with 2 out of 5. We only have really one CC skill that we want to be using. It's very good, but there's just the one. It can't really be comboed into anything. It's just a disabling effect. Now, the last score we want to talk about for Blade Dancer is the utility. Now, Blade Dancer does bring a nice little bit of utility to the table. especially with its ancestral skills. So again, on the Sonic Wave, we have two ancestral versions of this, which are nice in group PvP and in PvE. And in 1 vs 1 if you want to use it this way. So we have the Life Sonic Wave, which unleashes a magically enhanced wave, removing one negative effect from all allies in a wide corridor extending 15 meters in front of you. This does include yourself. You cannot use this while you're disabled, but you can use it to remove like any kind of debuff on you while you're not CC'd. Or if you're snared, you can use it too. As long as you're able to cast it, you can remove a disabling effect from you. It is at random, but you can use it, and this is really good to use in group PvP to like throw on a mage ball to, you know, remove disabling effects from your allies. And it can be used to save your healer from a melee and things like that if you're lucky and you remove the right effect. But it's also very powerful in PvE. Like a lot of dungeons, this is very useful to use in a lot of scenarios to remove like one-shot mechanics off your allies and things like that. Very good. So good utility in the form of the Life Sonic Wave. And then of course we have the Mist Sonic Wave, which next to nobody uses because the base Sonic Wave is so powerful, but I'll tell you what it does, just so you're aware. Unleashes a magically enhanced wave, granting Mist Sonic Wave to all allies in a wide corridor extending 15 meters in front of you. So it's the same animation, same area. Affected allies escape all current targeting by enemies and can't be the target of enemies for 6 seconds. So unfortunately, this doesn't apply to you. So you don't get the buff, but when you cast it, any allies you hit are target free for 6 seconds. So no one can target them. They can still be hit by AoE, but archers and melees and things like that can't target them. So if you hit your entire group with this, yes, you're saving them from being able to be targeted for 6 seconds. But if you actually hit like a very large portion of your group, or literally everyone, if you're in like 5v5 or 6v6 and you hit everyone else in your party for 6 seconds, the only person that's going to be able to be targeted is you. And any archer, mage, or Darkrunner is just going to target you. And for 6 seconds, they're just going to be like, alright, what up? We'll kill you then. So more often than not, this is just going to put a huge target on your head. Or, you know, I guess if you use it correctly, it can be very useful in large-scale PvP. Or it can be used in a small situation, like maybe your healer is getting jumped by 2 or 3 melees. You want to throw it on them alone to stop them from getting finished, and then you can go after the melees or something. It's good in some situations. If you find, you know, if you figure out how to use it in your own way, then feel free to run it. But more often than not, that same situation, like 3 melees on your healer, you can just cast regular Sonic Wave on those 3 melees. Then they can't target your healer or you. So, you know, in most cases where the Mist Sonic Wave can be applied, you could just apply the Sonic Wave in almost the exact same way and get the same effect. Sure, it doesn't last as long, but it just seems to be better. So the next utility we'll talk about is Healing Him. Now, we can take the Stone Healing Him, which applies a charm on everyone that it bounces to, which can hit a minimum of 3 enemies and up to, well, a minimum of 1 technically. You can just throw it on 1 enemy. If there's no one else around to bounce to, it'll just hit that 1. But it can hit up to 9 enemies, I think, if it bounces and doesn't hit anyone more than once. It can hit up to 9 enemies. It won't hit pets. And what this does is it applies a charm to all those targets for 8 seconds. And if anyone, including yourself, more often than not, you want to use this in group PvP when you have a healer casting songs. But if you have a healer playing any of the perform skills, they get additional effects while there is a charm on an enemy. So this is the main one and the main reason why we would take the charm in group PvP. So the perform skill, Bulwark Ballad, normally it does increase the physical and magic defense of you and your allies within a 10 meter radius. It's up to 30 meters if you have loudspeaker, I believe. That's 35 meters. So if you have any healer within 35 meters of you, you get the massive physical and magic defense buff. If you charm some enemies, it gets an additional effect, which decreases the physical and magic defense of charm targets by 50%. So If you throw this in a mage clump, whether you jump in it or not, if there is a single healer casting Bulwark Ballad, or any class for that matter casting Bulwark Ballad, in a 35 meter radius, everyone in that clump that gets hit by the charm is going to have a massive reduced physical and magic defense, which can break a raid. It makes them extremely squishy, it makes them extremely easy to kill, regardless. So if you call out a charm on a clump in comms in a group situation, mages will know, because they know what charm does if they've played this game for any amount of time. Charm means drop your big skills now, because they're going to be squishy. And melees are going to jump in, mages are going to jump in, you're going to jump in if you've got the balls to jump into a mage ball, and you're going to do a lot more damage than you normally would. So very, very powerful utility skill to use in group situations. Not necessarily in 1v1, because someone has to be casting a perform skill to get the disabling effects on them. I will mention that anyone casting Bloody Chanty is going to reduce their skill damage on the charm target. Anyone casting Quickstep is going to reduce their movement speed, and anyone casting Ode is going to be dealing magic damage to them continuously while they're charmed as well. So if you have a healer that's casting all 4 songs and you're charming them, then they're going to get massively disabled. Their damage, their defense, they're going to be taking damage, and they're going to be massively reduced on movement speed as well. So extremely powerful, especially in group situations. So very good utility skill. Our Battle Hymn is also a very powerful utility. Obviously, it gives us mad increased attack speed and movement speed, but also for every ally that it hits in the 30 meter effect range as well. So if you drop it on a whole raid, everyone's going to get 30 seconds of increased attack speed and increased movement speed. Very strong in all situations, group PvP, whether it's small scale, large scale. You can almost hit a 100-man raid as long as you guys are grouped nicely. Very easily, give everyone the buff. You can use it in dungeons to buff at the start of a fight. It's good for all classes: mages, melees, archers, healers. Attack speed and move speed is useful for every single class. Attack speed gives global cooldown reduction. Move speed is self-explanatory. Move speed is never a bad thing. Very good utility, very good for power, good for the raid, good for you, good for everyone. Amazing skill. So overall, Blade Dancer is a very powerful offensive class. We have a lot of power, good mobility. Sadly, we have a slight lack of CC, and we have a nice bit of utility if we take the Ancestrals to give us that. So a very well-rounded, high-end DPS class. A very fun playstyle with a lot of damage. I would highly recommend trying this class. The next class we want to talk about is our bonus class for this video. This is not a popular class by any means, but it is very fun to play, and I actually made a video playing this class as well as another class with Malediction. This is Ragebinder. Now Ragebinder is Battle Rage, Shadowplay, and Malediction. Now Malediction, at first glance, is a mage subclass, right? It's all magic stuff. You would think, you can't really play Malediction with a melee class because it's all mage abilities, it's all mage damage. Why would you want to play this? Well, here's why. We have a number of skills in this class that are extremely fun to use and actually quite useful to use as a melee. But we're going to go through and we'll talk about each of them in their different categories. So we've given this a 4 out of 5 for power. Its damage is no worse or no less than something like a Darkrunner, but obviously it doesn't have the mad power boosts that something like a Blade Dancer has. So it's a 4 out of 5. Good damage, you can still kill people easily, but nothing crazy is boosting your damage. We do get a passive here if you take enough points that increase your attack speed when you consume a Malice charge, which we'll talk about soon, which can give you up to 200 attack speed, which is nice, but sometimes we don't take this many points. If you do, it's nice, then that's cool. And you can't argue with any attacks, with bonus attack speed. It's always nice. So 4 out of 5 for power. Next thing we'll talk about is mobility. Now, this class gives us 2 mobility skills. They're both good and bad in their own kind of ways, but they're both also really extremely fun, which you can't look past fun, right? So the first skill is Grasping Void. Now, Grasping Void reads, teleports the caster and up to 10 allies to a selected location within 10 meters. So The 10 meters just means allies within 10 meters. The actual range on this is 37 meters. So it is an extremely long teleport for you and up to 10 allies grouped around you, right? Now this doesn't sound that great, but it's extremely fun to use, and it's actually quite good to make like fun plays. You'll probably get yelled at using this in like an actual serious raid v raid situation where you're like 50 people and more, because taking 10 people into an enemy group of 50 is normally suicide. But in some situations, this can be really fun to make plays as long as you're not hindering your raid or your group. I've made a check out my Ragebinder / Ghostblade video. I'll leave a link in the description. It's basically us in Drill Camp Arena just making dumb plays with Grasping Void. But essentially, it's just a group teleport for you and up to 10 people, which has an extremely long range and is really fun to use. So you can do so many fun plays with this in group situations where you can teleport yourself and friends instantly onto someone at a massively long range. But essentially, it has a 1.4 second cast time, so it's obviously pretty poor to use as an escape, because if you get CC'd in that 1.4 seconds, it won't go off and you won't be able to use it as an escape. So it's not a super reliable escape, but it is a very powerful small scale engage tool. If you watch the video, you'll see that you can use the teleport to teleport you and a small group of friends directly on the backline of an enemy raid where all the squishies are sitting, and you can easily delete them. And the way we were using it is if you have 2 people with Grasping Void, you can teleport in, delete someone in the backline, and then teleport, and then someone else uses Grasping Void to teleport you out to safety. And it is just so funny and so extremely fun to use. So try the class out. Have a muck around with Grasping Void with you and your friends. I can guarantee you will have fun, no matter how unpopular and weak people might think the class is. It's a lot of fun to play just because of this skill alone. Now, the second mobility skill we have is Void Surge, which reads, teleports the caster to a random location up to 15 meters away. Now, this could literally teleport. When you press it, it could teleport you a meter to the left, or it could teleport you 15 meters behind you, or 10 meters in front of you. It's completely random where it teleports you. So in some situations, this can be bad. You could, have a melee trying to dick you down and you want to just Void Surge to get away from them. But instead of teleporting 15 meters away to disorientate them and get to safety, you actually just teleport almost next to them, and it doesn't change anything, and you've just wasted time using the skill, and it's bad, right? But the second part of the skill reads, reduces the cooldown of Void Surge by 50% for each enemy within 5 meters of you at the teleport destination. So essentially, if you Void Surge and you land next to 2 people or more, it instantly resets the cooldown, so you can teleport again. Now, the way this functions in group PvP is essentially you either Void Surge and you get away to safety, or you Void Surge into the enemy raid or near multiple people, and you can instantly Void Surge again. So you can basically spam the skill until you're away from the enemy raid. Now, this could be terrible or it could be great. You could teleport to safety, or you could teleport yourself completely through the enemy raid and end up on the backside of it where you are completely not safe at all and you will die. But it will be funny because you will teleport reset like 4 times through the enemy raid, blinking around like fucking Goku on meth. So it's a good time for that reason. But yeah, very funny skill, not reliable at all, but fun to use, and in some situations can create the funniest scenarios. So we give Ragebinder a 4 out of 5 on mobility. There is 2 mobility skills. They're both hit and miss when it comes to their uses, but both extremely fun to use in a lot of scenarios, so bonus points for that. Now we're going to talk about the CC the class gives. We don't get a whole lot of CC. The skills we take, at least, we don't get CC. The only skill that really is usable as a melee CC-wise is Malicious Binding. Has a 0.2 second cast time, which is pretty insignificant as a cast time, but of course having to stand still to use any melee skill is pretty rough. But essentially it tethers the target to the current location for 5 seconds. So it throws down a pillar for 5 seconds, tethers them to that location. If they try and move away any more than 5 meters, it will pull them back instantly to the tether location. So being able to, bind like an archer or a mage that wants to kite and run away, and then stand near your binding location and then use your CC seals to lock them down while they're refined to that one small location is very powerful and shouldn't be overlooked. So very strong. It's even good against melees to fuck with them, because every time they get pulled back to the location, it really jars your camera as the person being pulled back, and can be very disorientating and really mess with you a lot. So good in a lot of situations. Stops people from escaping. You can use it in a lot of scenarios. So very good CC. But because of the lack of CC, we're going to give Ragebinder a 3 out of 5. Now, the last category we will talk about is utility. And we give Ragebinder a 4 out of 5 in utility. And here's why. We actually have quite a lot of utility. Obviously, we talked about the group teleport. Being able to teleport enemy friendlies out of danger is a great utility. You could walk up close to the mage ball, and as long as you're within 10 meters of the people stuck in the mage ball, you can Grasping Void out and take them out to safety and maybe save a few lives. It might annoy the raid breakers that are in there, but in some situations this might be necessary, and it is very useful. So good utility there. The next utility is Soulbound Edge. Now, this basically, you throw it on an enemy and it will reduce their magic and physical defense every second for 10 seconds. So it's basically 1,500 phys defense penetration once you let it stack up. After the 10 seconds is up, the buff will last for 6 seconds. So you'll have 6 seconds of them at 1,500 reduced phys defense. And obviously they'll get increasing phys defense reduction leading up to it as well. So, 150, 300, 450, 600, it'll just keep stacking up every second. So good to throw on a target you want to kill at the start of a fight, if you find a moment to do it. Also, it stacks up to 15 times. So if after you get 10 stacks up to the first 10 seconds, the buff lasts for 6 seconds. The cooldown is 15 seconds. So in the final second of the buff, you can throw another Soulbound Edge, which will then continue to stack it up to 15 times, where it will remain as long as you keep Soulbound Edge on the target. So you can get up to 2,250 phys defense reduction on target while dealing constant magic damage, but obviously we're melee. Magic damage is very insignificant. We're just there for the phys defense reduction. Very good to use against like healers and targets that are normally sometimes pretty difficult to pop. So good utility there. Next utility skill is Ring Throw. Now this, when thrown at a target, drops their right hand weapon for 3 seconds. So it has a 12 meter range. You can throw it at a melee target. It'll drop their right hand weapon. They won't even be able to attack you for that duration. The only melee skill they can really use is Hammer Toss, because it doesn't require a weapon. So very powerful against melees. Against archers, you're really just dropping their stat stick, so it'll reduce their damage a little bit, pretty insignificant. Against a mage, it's dropping their magic weapon, so reduces their magic attack by a very significant amount, especially if they're using a staff. Their magic attack will be reduced to almost nothing, and their damage will be very, very low. They can still use all their magic skills, so they could CC you, but any damage skills they blow in that 3 seconds aren't going to do very much damage to you at all, and they're going to waste cooldowns, and it's basically like mad damage mitigation, so very nice. And the other application for it is against healers. Obviously, the right-hand weapon for a healer is a club, which is the source of most of their healing power. So if you're trying to take out a healer and you don't want them to be able to, heal themselves right as you're about to finish them off, ring throw them, drop their club. Even if they blow a big heal, it will heal them, but it won't be for a very significant amount. So normally you can just DPS through it and kill them in that 3-second window. So very nice. And the next utility we have as a Ragebinder is the Shadow Cloak. Now, Shadow Cloak reads, cloaks the caster in a magical shadow that deflects eyes and minds for 1 second. So basically, you're untargetable for 1 second. Now, if you have your Fury stacks up and your Malice charges, and you use it with 5 or more stacks, it increases the duration for 3 seconds, so you get a total of 4 seconds of not being able to be targeted. If you have 10 stacks of Malice charges, it increases the duration for 5 seconds, so you get up to 6 full seconds of not being able to be targeted. And this is very easy to use at the start of a fight in like a 1v1 scenario. You can pop Shadow Cloak with your full 10 stacks up and not be able to be targeted for 6 seconds, which is actually very powerful against Most classes, obviously Mage can still drop AoE on you, but they have essentially no skills that they can CC you with in AoE unless they're playing like occultism or something. So any like Spellslinger, the only real CC they can hit you with for that 6 seconds is Freezing Earth, which is a snare, but you can just bond break that off anyway, and then they've wasted their ability to deep freeze you later on. So this is very powerful against all classes. Melees, obviously, they can't CC you unless they have some form of AoE CC, like a Executioner maybe has Hell Spear or something. But more often than not, against a melee and an archer, it's disabling 90% of their skills for up to 6 seconds. So very powerful, very good utility. And that's pretty much it. So that's the skills that we really mess with when we're playing this in the form of melee. Very fun class to play. Very, 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 very fun. So although this was a bonus and it is a bit of a meme class, don't take it too seriously, but also don't sweep it under the rug. It's fun to play. I recommend anyone who plays melee to go out and fuck with this class just a little bit, whether they're just messing around in duels with their friends or doing some drill camp arenas or some small scale PvP. It's fun to troll your friends. It's fun to troll your enemies. It's a fun class to play. Fuck with it, trust me. It's great. But yeah, that pretty much concludes this video. Obviously this is just part 1, so the second part of this video we're going to be covering classes like Shadowblade, Executioner, and our bonus for that video will probably be Blighter. Obviously because we're focusing on DPS oriented melee classes. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys agreed with my Darkrunner, Blade Dancer, and Ragebinder ratings for all their situations. But I will see you guys for part 2 of this video, and make sure to leave a comment, subscribe, and like the video. Cheers. See you guys next time.